highlighting particular points that I want, places that I wanted to go to very rapidly. But I do read these things over and over again. So yeah, they're pretty well worn. I recently read something from Seneca, the Stoic Seneca, and he said, of course, it's a bit out of context because at this time it was just when the printing press and printed material was coming into existence, and he said, man should have only very few books and read them many, many times. That was his, insight. I mean, he was extremely wise. If you read any of Seneca's poetry or any of his prose, whatever, he was one of the famous Stoics of that period. Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, these guys were the big guys. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's kind of it's Spartan. It's very kind of which is not a bad thing in a cluttered world of today. It's kind of the counterbalance. So anyway, just a little aside there. Welcome all to the great feast of consciousness. That was kind of something like that Rumi said. I just inspired by it. Rumi, I love Rumi. Did you all have a good Thanksgiving? Yes. I did. I served, like somewhere around 400 people. We have a big Thanksgiving gathering every year. We don't publicize it. It's been going on for about pretty close to 40 years. And people just come. And it's a potluck, We put it on our website, on the website of the temple there. And so yeah, it's a really good time to catch up with those people that I haven't seen in a while. It was really, really beautiful. One of my old friends that I worked with back in the late 80s and 90s is an author. He writes fiction, mostly novels and things like that. Though he did just finish a long project, a 4-year project. There's a historic building here in Gainesville called the Hippodrome, which was originally the post office in Gainesville, Florida. It's one of these, big columns and all kind of thing like that. I suppose it's an antebellum structure. And he wrote the history of it. And, it's a big kind of coffee table kind of book, pictures and all this stuff. 800, he said there was 800 pictures in it. And anyway, he and I, we've been friends for many years. And he was actually my boss when I worked for a technology company here in Gainesville for quite a number of years. And but we were friends before that. And anyway, he was talking about the process of writing and just the nuance of it all and the creative process. He gets up every morning, he meditates, and then he spends 5 or 6 hours a day writing. And I thought, wow, that's incredible, man. I mean, he's told me that over the years, and he does it. He's the guy that has a steel focus. I mean, when you're talking to him, there's no question that we're present here. He's a beautiful soul, and I love him. He inspires me. Well, he certainly inspires me on the writing piece. So we talked a lot about the writing and how to lay things out. I want to write more because I think that it's important for people to be able to reflect on things. It's wonderful to be able to have this kind of satsang and this kind of an interaction. But I think it's also important, and I'm interested in your all's feedback as well, of course. I think it's important to have things to reflect on in writing that are there. You can always go back to it. It's really hard, as Sally pointed out to me. I apologize, Sally. I haven't gotten that worked out yet, but I'm going to get it worked out. You caught me off guard. It was crazy, crazy week. And it's hard to go back to a recording. And one of the things, I guess that's Nicholas there, and Michael's not here today. I don't know where he is, but there he is. Okay, good. So one of the things that Michael and I, welcome, Michael. I was just getting ready to talk about you.
Sorry,
you have to go away so I can talk about you now. No, no. So what Michael and I are working on, and one of the things that I'm really, really keen on to kind of overcome the difficulty of getting back to and understanding where we are with an audio. Like Sally, she said, halfway through it stopped. Okay, now, well, how would she get back to that place? How would she find that place? So what we're planning on doing is, this is a solution that I haven't heard anything better. So Michael, if you've got anything updated on this, it's a better solution, let me know. But what we're planning on doing is we're gonna put up on YouTube, but privately. So we're going to give you all the link to the YouTube video. And in the video, there will be transcript, of course. But what we're going to do is we're going to also give you, when we give you the video link, we're going to also give you the transcript, but nicely, not like you get the line in 2 or 3 words in YouTube, not like that, but it'll be just like on a page, and it'll be all laid out with the timestamps at each point. So Sally remembers like kind of the last thing that she heard, and she just dials down 5 or 10 pages, whatever it is. It's probably going to be about a 25-page document. That's about how long 2 hours is. And then she'll just go, oh, right there. And so at that timestamp, she'll just dial right into that timestamp, and then she'll be right there where she was. So it'll be a lot easier. You'll be able to scan that written page document and be able to kind of decide, oh, I want to go back to that place where we talked about vrittis, or we talked about chitta, whatever. And you'll be able to go right there. And Nicholas likes that. Good. So, I mean, that's what I've been thinking about it a lot, and trying to figure out what is the best, trying to use the technology that we have to make our lives easier, and most importantly, more efficient. That's what my thing is. Easy, okay, but efficiency, because efficiency is what cuts through the time constraints that we have. We all have time constraints. I mean, how much more time do we have? That's called the big time constraint. So, that's something that we just can't get past. So we must figure out. My view is that looking at technology, I'm always looking at technology to figure out how we can cut through the time constraint issue and make everything more efficient, whatever we plan on doing. So that's the plan. And hopefully, maybe, I don't know what Michael's schedule is. I know he's busy too. I mean, but this week I'm going to have some time, and I'm hopefully get that site up and get it ready to go, and we can do it.
Yeah,
So
I should be able to do today and maybe one other this week. And as Mark was saying, what we've played with a little bit is like I can take the transcript and the video and like very lightly edit them. So, if there's like main topics, I can kind of separate out main topics in the transcript, that kind of thing. I mean, it's still going to be verbatim, so it's not going to be, the ums and the ohs and all that stuff will be in there, but certain quirks that the transcript seems to have, and certain words that the transcript gets wrong, but at least it gets wrong consistently, I can change those. I forget, it does something funny for Baba,
yeah,
but that's an easy one to change.
yeah.
Um, so that level is that's not too time consuming.
Mhm. That's good. That's good, Michael. Thank you. I didn't want to put you on the spot for that. I mean,
No, I'm ready to get back to it.
okay. That'd be cool. So anyway, that's kind of what the trajectory is. We're going to be working on it this week for sure. And then the other thing is we're going to develop a little bit more content, short form content on the YouTube channel that will be available to anyone. Michael's been keen on that, and so we're going to try that and see. I'm not that excited about it only because I'm such a darn perfectionist, and I don't really think that yeah, I mean, I don't know. Maybe there's a vanity issue there. I don't know. I don't know what it is. I haven't really even kind of gotten into it, trying to process it or anything like that. It's just if it happens, I'm ready to go along with it. Michael's got the juice on that, and so I'm ready to go with it. So we're going to work on that, and then the other thing that I'm going to be working on is my podcast. I'm going to create a short form podcast, which is going to be about 15 or 20 minutes max. Could be 10 minutes, 10 to 20 minutes, so that you can just dip into that, and you'll be able to get some really good content. And there'll be a written side of that as well. So I'm going to continue with the long form content, which is what we have now, which is approximately 2 hours, and those are going to continue to roll. I've already got plenty of them done, meaning done. I've done the interviews. I just have to do the editing and prep and get it all ready to go. But then there's going to be, in addition to that, the short form stuff on the podcast. So there'll be a lot more podcast audio content that will be available. And that's what we're working on. That's what I'm working on, that side of it, the audio piece. And Michael's working on the video side of it. So just trying to, get more exposure and give more opportunity to dial in. That's really the goal. That's what the holidays look like for me. So let's dig into so have you all been reading and the beautiful Timony there, and are there any things right off the bat before I launch into this thing, about the content, that you have issues with? Because I'm going to bring up plenty of issues as we launch into it. So I want to start really digging in because I'm so excited. I mean, I've been just poring over this. It's just it's an opportunity for me to just revisit this in a much deeper way, than I would normally, because I don't have the audience that's deep enough like you guys. So I cherish this opportunity to be able to really dig in and go deep on this. So I hope you guys are planning on that as well. I think it's a very important aspect of practice, of our daily practice. We need to understand this basic scripture here. and well, of course, how it relates to the other side, which is Kashmir Shaivism. And the two most important scriptures, in my view, are the Pratyabhijna Hridayam, which we've already gone through, and the Yoga Sutras. And I mean, I have to be careful there, because actually they're the three main scriptures of Kashmir Shaivism, which the Pratyabhijna Hridayam is the most succinct. It's the shortest. And then the Shiva Sutras is really kind of the basis of Kashmir Shaivism. And of course, any discussion about literature of Kashmir Shaivism cannot leave out the Spandakarika. Those three pieces are the whole of Kashmir Shaivism, really. And yes, there are many, many other subsidiary commentaries and things that even get much more esoteric. But those three scriptures of Kashmir Shaivism, and I'm going to shift gears and cement it back to Yoga Sutras, those three scriptures are really what lay out the whole basis of the philosophy of yoga. And very clearly, and they're very accessible. What I mean by that is they're easy to understand. The Shiva Sutras is very easy to understand, and as well as the Spandakarika, it's very easy to understand. And so, especially, I'm saying again to you all very specifically, after you have gone through the Pratyabhijna, the Shiva Sutras and Spandakarika is going to be easy to understand. And it's going to be very edifying and enlightening when we get to that. But the Yoga Sutras are the underpinning of actual practice, meditative practice, because it deals with the primary vehicle, which is the mind. And breaking that down and clarifying that and the relationship to it is a critical piece. You have to understand the mind. And of course, Shaivism treats the mind differently than the Yoga Sutras do, but they're not in conflict. And that's the important point. You may not get that clarity until we're farther down, and maybe not till the very end, but they're not in conflict. And that's the point that I want you to always be coming from. If you start to feel there's a conflict, you have to drop back on that and say, wait a minute, there's not conflict there. How do these work together? That's the point of view that you must come from. Because if you start looking at they're in conflict, then you're gonna be off completely, and it's not gonna be beneficial. So, having said that, I want to just be real clear that the philosophical, metaphysical underpinning of the Yoga Sutras is the Sankhya philosophy. And Sankhya, like yoga, those two are two of the 6 classical systems of Indian philosophy. Sankhya is a dualistic system. And yet we know that our principal focus is unity, oneness, which is what Shaivism is all about, unequivocally. Here with yoga, you have to really, really be clear. It gets very nuanced at various places. And particularly when you're reading the commentary of Taimni, or any of them, actually, because whether you're reading Taimani or you're reading Hariharananda or both of them, Hariharananda was a Sankhya Acharya. That was the basis. In fact, his ashram in India is one of the few places in India that teaches Sankhya philosophy. One of the very, very few places. There are not many places in India, again, which is kind of the birthplace of all of these philosophical systems. So we have to take that into consideration when we're reading through the commentary. My focus has been in the practical application of the techniques and insights that are put forward by Patanjali and the primary commentator, which is Vyasa. Without Vyasa's commentary, and I think I might have mentioned this, but I want to be very clear about it. Without Vyasa's commentary, the Yoga Sutras would be unintelligible to anyone. So we're relying very heavily on Vyasa's commentary. In fact, the scholars say it's canonical. It's part of the canon of yoga. The yoga philosophy is called Yoga Darshana. That is the philosophy of yoga. And Vyasa's commentary on what Patanjali compiled is almost equal to, because again, you can't understand, not we, you, us, no one could understand the real deep import and nuanced significance of the Yoga Sutras because of their pithy nature, and that's just the way it is. So if we start off with sutra number 1, again, this is just a further clarification of what I've said in many different ways, but this is an important contextual as we start to dive in here. What they say in the first sutra here, is what is yeah, I don't have it in Sanskrit here, but we'll just dial it up here real quick. I had made some notes, but I left the Sanskrit off. Oh well. So in the I just want to mention this because there's a couple of words there that I want to highlight just to clarify. See, Hariharananda, when I was studying Hariharananda back in the day, I used to be able to read Devanagari, and now I can't read it anymore. I mean, I'm not practiced, it's kind of like the guitar or Spanish, I'm not practiced anymore. So Hariharananda doesn't have the transliteration. They've got the Sanskrit and then the English. So I have to refer to a different text to get that initial transliteration. So yeah, it was Ata Yoga Anusanam. And the Anusanam is the key word. Ata, of course, means now. And then Anusanam is a word that is very important to understand contextually what's going on. Essentially, what Anusanam means is that we're going to continue the dialogue. So, as I've mentioned, Patanjali compiled. All he did was compile the existent understanding of that particular time. He took yoga, which was all the Vedic understanding and everything that was available to him at that time. He took that and compiled it into a reasonable thread. And of course, what was the vehicle at that time that was prevalent was the sutra form of transmission. And the reason that was is because still we were at a period when most of the transmission, particularly in the field of yoga, was oral transmission. And so the sutra brought it down to just a few words. And then the understanding of those words, because all Sanskrit words have multiple meanings depending on the context. So each word and the context of that and the full meaning of the sutra was explained by the teacher. So this was this oral transmission that was going on. And so what is said in this first sutra is that what we're doing is we're just continuing the existing dialogue that has and is prevalent in this time. And you'll notice that there's some assumptions that are made as we go through the sutras that you understand certain things. And of course, we will unpack those to make sure you do, but there's an assumption on the part of Patanjali. That's an understanding, because there's only like one or two sutras on some things. For example, like asanas. There's only just a couple of sutras in the whole Yoga Sutras, and yet the eight-limbed path, asana, is one of the limbs, and there's only one or two sutras on it. So there's a lot of understanding about that, and of course that wasn't necessarily the focus. The yoga of today, the sort of yoga studio of today kind of thing, was not at all what Patanjali in that era, that was not what they were focusing on, was doing a bunch of different funny poses, named after animals. No, that wasn't at all what it was. What the whole focus of asana was, when we get to it, you'll see asana is steady posture. That's steady mentally, a mental posture, as well as a physical posture. So all the asanas were focused on developing a very stern and stable capacity to sit for extended periods of time in meditation. Because the whole of the Yoga Sutras is really about meditation. The whole thing is focused on how to meditate, what the obstacles are in meditation, what the challenges are, and how to break that down, how to overcome those, and then how to, once you understand that, how to use the mind to become a very, very powerful weapon to cut through the material existence and all the challenges that you have, the samskaras, so that you can sit quietly in your own essential nature, which is what it says in Sutra number 3, right at the very, very beginning. So again, the whole sutras, all the Yoga Sutras, are about how to get to Sutra number 3, where you rest in your own essential nature. So the word anusaranam is telling us that we're now going to continue. We're going to talk about yoga, Hatha yoga. We're going to talk about yoga now, and we're going to continue the conversation that has been going on for centuries. And then he goes to the second sutra and he says, yoga's chitta vritti nirodha. That is probably the most famous sutra in the Yoga Sutras. And he says that yoga is the arresting, the stilling, again, we'll go into the various words there, of the mind, is stilling the mind, is getting control over any activity in the mind. At the very least, understanding the activity. And that's the first stage, is you start to understand that, you start the uncoupling process. What yoga and meditation is about is the uncoupling process, where you start to realize that I am not what I'm thinking. Most ordinary people in the world, they have a thought and they become attached to that thought, and they think that they are that. And it becomes it's as gross as, I am my car. I am my car, because my car is what I identify with. If I don't have a nice car, then I'm nothing. I mean, actually, people think like that. If I don't have a nice house, then I'm nobody. People think like that. If I don't have a really good dog when I'm walking in the morning or whenever, then I'm nothing. But that dog gives me something special. It makes me important. You know, I mean, these things sound kind of ridiculous to us because we have perspective. So the first is to understand that we are not those things in our mind. The mind is something separate from us. And we're going to break down the mind. The words that we use in the Yoga Sutras for the mind. The process of that uncoupling, the uncoupling process, continues on to the point where you start to observe, as the witness, all the things that are going through the mind. Now, if we were looking at Shaivism, we understand that the essence of mind is consciousness. That's not the focus of the Yoga Sutras. The Yoga Sutras are really taking us into the nitty-gritty and granularity of the nature of the mind. And this is an important investigation. It's not something to get hung up on, but it is something to know. That's the way I hold it. You can become really crazy, thinking about these things and just like getting into the real granularity of it. I don't think, my own personal experience has been, that's not been really productive and conducive to my upliftment and the movement of my awareness. It's important to understand it, but it's not something that you want to really get into unless you want to just get into this whole machination in your mind about stuff. The idea is to make the mind quiet. If this makes your mind disturbed, then you're not approaching it properly. And that's an important thing to keep in mind. Remember, the goal is to become quiet, become still. And so the idea here is that when you understand the nature of the mind and all its nuances, and through a very granular investigation, then you can let it be. You can let it be. You don't have to analyze every single thought in detail. You know that it just is what it is, and it's doing what it's doing, and you understand the process. But you, the focus, you, the witness, the observer, the consciousness and the awareness underneath that is what I'm focusing on. Not the noise, not the machinations and all the other things like that. So I just wanted to clarify the context of Patanjali unpacking and codifying the thought and practice of the day. And the other aspect to this, which is critically important, is to understand that this Yoga Sutras is based on direct experience. It was created by sages, practitioners who had the direct experience of the self. And that's what this is. This is a breakdown of that process to arrive at the direct experience of the self. That means no modifications whatsoever, just pure stillness and peace, which is the nature of the self. At the very end of the path, it's stillness and peace. And yes, there is a great deal of bliss that wells up as a result of that, particularly in the before the final stages. In the final stage, it's just completely indescribable. And you'll experience these things. You'll go in and experience them, and you'll feel them, but you won't stabilize it initially. And then the process, of course, as we've discussed, is a process of stabilizing that pure state of awareness, which in the Yoga Sutras, they refer to as Kaivalya, which is what is the fourth chapter, the fourth pada of this is referred to, Kaivalya pada. That's the fourth chapter of the Yoga Sutras. Okay, so let's continue on with the second sutra, which is Yogas Chitta Vritti Nirodha. There are 4 Sanskrit words there. And since Taimni broke these down and broke them out, we'll go ahead with that. And there's a few things there that I want to comment on, particularly. I don't necessarily agree with Taimni in his commentary all the time. And the reason is because I have that background, as we all have the background of Shaivism, which again, to understand why there's a potential conflict there, or it could be seen that way, is remember that Patanjali and Sankhya was much, much earlier. They don't really know exactly when Patanjali wrote the Yoga Sutras, but it's anywhere from the 2nd century BC to the 2nd century AD. That's a pretty wide swath of about 500 years. So, but we have to kind of put it all in context, because Shaivism came into its own in 900. So it's a further evolution of the meditative process and the philosophical process. So this is important to understand. Why is there a conflict? Well, it starts off as a sort of a rudimentary understanding. I mean, if you go all the way back to the Vedas, you can go all the way back, 5,000-6,000 years, and you see that the early Vedas, the Rig Veda is the oldest Veda of them all. You see that the early Vedas weren't very philosophically oriented. They were more ritualistic, and they were about acquiring things in the world, propitiating deities and things like that. All legitimate stuff, but kind of really not what we're interested in at all. Then later on, in the evolution of the Vedic tradition, comes the the latter portion of the Vedas, which we call and is called in the tradition the Upanishads. Upanishads. Upanishads are the basis of Vedanta. Vedanta is one of the 6 classical Indian philosophies. And Vedanta means end of Vedas. Veda and Anta means end of Vedas. And the end of Vedas are referred to as the Upanishads. Here again, we don't agree, we meaning the position of Kashmir Shaivism, which in my view is the ultimate expression of the exploration of consciousness. It is articulated and expounded most fully and completely in Kashmir Shaivism, the pinnacle of which was the time of Abhinavagupta, who was the very top. He was the ultimate exponent of Kashmir Shaivism. Vedanta was expounded by Shankaracharya. And we have a little bit of, and you can see in some of the commentaries, if you've read Jaidev Singh, any of Jaidev Singh's translations of the Shaivistic literature, which would be the Pratyabhijna or the Shiva Sutras and the Spandakarika, various other of the translations of various scriptures. But you'll see that they take issue with the position of Vedanta. The one thing, the big issue there is that in Vedanta, they don't believe that the world is real. The world is an illusion in Vedanta, according to Vedantic philosophy. The self and Brahman are one. So everybody's cool about that. So the individual self and the supreme reality are one. Everybody's good with that. But then Vedanta says the world is an illusion. But in Shaivism, we don't say that. We don't experience it. And that is the further evolution of the philosophical understanding and the experiential, most importantly, the experiential understanding of those that are practicing deeply. So the world is actually only an expression of your own self, because there is only one. Everything is just pure consciousness. There's no separation there between world and self. Any questions there on this at all? Any thoughts? Any comments? Michael, I see you.
No, it's just a lot. That's all.
Yeah, I am covering a lot of ground, but hey, I'm not holding back with you guys. And I just think you all have the capability, you all smart. And most importantly, though, it's not an intellectual. This is not an intellectual exercise. And that's the thing I want to emphasize here. This is an experiential exercise. Everything we're talking about is something that we should be directly experiencing. And so the only reason to discuss it is to be able to contextualize our direct experience and to facilitate the unfoldment and the depth of our direct experience. So I want to emphasize again, this is not a philosophical, an intellectual exercise. And so we'll say, well, how do we approach that then? If we're not going to use our intellect, well, of course we do, but we don't want to get too attached to figuring it out. My approach, and I don't know if it was just circumstance or what. I mean, we didn't have the time in when I was younger and being around Baba. There wasn't the time. We chanted 6 hours a day, meditated a couple hours a day, and we did seva and all kinds of. There was just no time whatsoever. And Baba was like a hurricane. You know, if you've ever prepared for a hurricane, that's what it was like being around Baba, preparing for a hurricane. So it was just there was no time. So the idea of really digging into this and having to unpack it intellectually, it just wasn't available, even if I had the capacity at that time, which frankly I don't believe I did compared to where I am today, to really unpack it intellectually. I mean, some of you are much more advanced intellectually than I certainly was at that time, maybe now too. So I'll give you all plenty of credit because I do believe it's true. Um, but I just would read over it. And this is what the method that I recommend that you all take is just read over it and read over it multiple times over the years as you continue to unpack it, and it'll just start to open up for you. It's not kind of a thing that you figure it out, you know, and you don't go to the next until you figure it out. Just keep reviewing it and reflecting internally in your internal process, and allow it to open up for you. My meditation is one where I ask the supreme infinite consciousness to tell me what I need to know. That's the way I start and end all of my meditations. Tell me what I need to know. Make me aware of what I need to know. And the need to know is to know the self. That's implied in the question. I maintain an ongoing dialogue with this supreme intelligence. I started off with a faith that I believe in this infinite intelligence. And now it's just, there's so much going back and forth that there's no question in my mind about it. It's not a belief anymore, it's a direct experience. And that's what you will have as you begin to engage that dialogue. You'll start to see, oh, she is talking to me. Because you'll become, as you continue your process of meditation and refinement through meditation, your mind will become more and more subtle, and you'll become more and more aware of the faint, initially, the faint whispers of this supreme intelligence speaking to you in your life, in every aspect. And it's those faint whispers that we become sensitive to initially. And then it becomes, it's almost like, you know, being hit in the head. It's so obvious and clear. And you wonder, like, if you didn't pay attention, you go, what in the world was I thinking about? That was so obvious. And of course, that's all generally, not always, but most of the time it's in retrospect. And we're saying, oh my gosh, wow, it was as clear as a bell. But we didn't hear it. So that's just a little tip on that. Somebody, Nicholas is sending me something. You know, I never look at the chat. Sometimes it pops up and I just, you know, I don't even look, but I see Nicholas said something. So thank you, Nicholas. You can always interrupt me, by the way. I really appreciate your, oh yes. Well, that's the whole reason I divine adventure we're immersed in. Yes, that's right. So I guess you all can see this chat too, right? You can see, yeah, okay, good, good. So yeah, the whole idea is to open that dialogue and create the space so that we can actually hear the dialogue going on and we can experience that directly. And the process of meditation, there's a couple aspects to it. One is that you are through the process, whether it be just japa or contemplation or whatever you're doing, dialing into the subtler aspects of your being, you are purifying the subtle body, which is where the mind is. And then when I do japa, for example, one of the things that I focus on sometimes, I'll start off doing japa, or even in the middle of it, I'll just acknowledge that this japa, this vibrational field that I am working in right now, is purifying the subtle body. That central channel is being purified. And over time, what I've experienced is that everything just becomes much, much quieter. And so the dialogue becomes much more pronounced in terms of seeing what is being presented by this supreme consciousness as we unfold our lives in every moment of our life. And that's really what a mystic is all about, is just being dialed in to that vibrational field and being able to hear that constant dialogue. And you can read the biographies, autobiographies of some of the mystics of whatever tradition, all the traditions, and that's they're hearing it and seeing it like it's just like we're seeing each other right now. And that's the process. So that's one aspect of it, is the purification aspect. When you're dialed into that vibration, you're invoking that vibrational field, and that power, the power of that, as we talk about omnipotence, the power of that vibrational field is purifying the subtle channel. And my experience of that, as what the sages have referred to, is that purification is what stills the mind. And when you are in that state, I'll say, the state of stillness, you can hear and see and feel the vibration of the infinite intelligence speaking through us. That's one of the great diseases of modern time, is that we're just so busy. We're busy with everything. But the ability to actually drop into the place of stillness right in the midst of all the activity is powerful. And that's where mantra, at least for me, that's where mantra really, really changes the game. It's a complete game changer. I mean, I can be in the midst of the most chaotic circumstance and the mantra will just come up and it'll just be total peace. And I'll just feel what needs to be done in that circumstance will be very clear. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's absolutely definitive. So, shall we proceed with Sutra number 2, Yogas Chitta Vritti Nirodha. So Taimani breaks out these 4 words. And honestly, I really like the simplicity and clarity of Hariharananda's definition of yoga. Yoga is samadhi. That's it. That's what Hariharananda said. That was his commentary on this particular sutra. Yoga is samadhi. And I'll say, in addition to that, yoga is the method to realize samadhi. So it's both the end and the means. And that's powerful when you really think about that. Mantra is both the end and the means. And that is a very, very powerful principle and concept to understand, particularly if you apply that to your practice and start to experience it directly. It's the end and the means. So that's really beautiful. For me, that really resonates. The simplicity of it is what resonates with me. And this is what will hold it in our consciousness. Simplicity is what will keep it there. The importance and the simplicity of it is what keeps it in the forefront of our awareness. So as far as I'm concerned, irrespective of the large commentary by Taimni, yoga is simply samadhi. It's the end, and it's the process and the means to get there. That's simple terms. So, and Taimni talks about the multiple meanings of yoga, and there are many, many different meanings. Just like one of the things I was inspired this summer speaking with Vivek. Vivek Desai he's one of the managers there at Shanti Mandir. Well, he has a PhD in biochemistry from Princeton. Intellectual, okay, but he's a yogi. He's a yogi first and foremost now, and he also studied Sanskrit, so he's a Sanskrit scholar. He studied with one of the greatest Sanskrit scholars of my generation, which is Jha. His name was Acharya Jha. He died just a few years ago. He actually Vivek and Acharya Jha was responsible for translating the version of the Guru Gita, which is sold by Shanti Mandir. It's a word for word. It's a big format. I don't think I have it right here. I've got another room there. It's a larger format, but it's a complete breakout of the whole Guru Gita, which, if the Siddha Path, that's like the primary chant scripture. It's the essence of the Siddha Path. The Guru Gita is the essence of the Siddha Path. And we used to chant it every morning in the ashram. Now we chant it only on Thursdays and Sundays in the ashram. But in those days, in Baba's days, we chanted it every single morning. That's the way we woke up. 5:30 in the morning, it was Guru Gita. So anyway, it's beautiful. It's beautifully done, and it's a scholarly piece, unquestionable. And Vivek worked with Professor Jha, who was his teacher in the translation process. So that was kind of his seva, was to be working on that. But he also was studying with Professor Jha. So this is after he did his whole thing, academic thing. It was 5 years later. Then he went to India and spent 5 years studying Sanskrit. So anyway, I had a wonderful. I love having conversations with him. He's deep, and he really opens up to me because he knows I'm keenly interested in all this stuff. So he can talk like I like to talk to you all. He talks to me that way. We can go really deep into stuff that most people, they would just gloss over. They leave. Well, we do often meet each other at lunch, and of course, we have started a conversation. There's people around, and after a few minutes, it's just he and I are at the table because there's nothing here that I can do. So it's wonderful. He inspires me, and he did one of the presentations in our course. He and his brother Vinay is Nityananda's personal assistant and also one of the managers there. So the two boys, I mean, can you imagine that the parents are just like they're ecstatic. I've met both the parents. They're just unbelievable. So they're both their boys are like yogis of the highest order, committed to the guru and all that. So they come to the ashram a lot. And mother, of course, you can't keep an Indian mother out of the kitchen. So I've enjoyed much of her Indian cooking, and it's ecstatic. So I mean, there's nothing like an Indian mother cooking like in her home kind of thing. And in the ashram for her, it's like the home. It's not like commercial Indian food. That's one thing. Okay, that's a good entry place. But when you really taste the home cooking of an Indian, there's nothing in the world like it. The way they work with spices and the way they integrate things, and the whole medicinal aspect of it that underpins the Indian cooking, Indian cuisine is underpinned by the science of Ayurveda. So it's all healing. It's wonderful. Anyway, Vivek inspires me. And so we've had some deep conversations about Sanskrit and the nature of Sanskrit. It's one of the things I actually want to write about. Some of the insights that I've had. And of course, then I came back here and just continued studying, getting back, looking at a lot of my old Sanskrit stuff. I mean, I've got the English Sanskrit dictionary, which is like about that thick. It's a tome. It's one of the biggest books I have in my library, and for all the words. And then you look up a word, but of course you got to be able to read Devanagari in there. But you look up a word, and you'll have 20 different meanings. Some of them quite divergent, very different, and that's the way it is with Sanskrit. So Sanskrit's a contextual language, and the meaning is borne out in the context in which it's used. That's one of the problems that we're having with translating some of Abhinavagupta's stuff, mainly his Magna Carta, which is the Tantra Loka. It's the scholars. You can't translate that level of exposition without being a practitioner. So the academics are having a problem because they don't understand the mystical context of the key words in some of the sutras. And so it's got to be a collaborative kind of effort. There just isn't enough people to really work it through. So fortunately, Lakshmanju did a full exposition of Tantra Loka while he was alive. And John Hughes and his wife and the family are working to get it translated. I think we've got like three volumes of what is as much as like a 36 volume work. And unfortunately, it's only in a dialogue form. It's not, it's atrocious, Michael, compared to what we're trying to do. I mean, and we're just this first level of what we're doing. But I mean, it's so challenging to plow through. It's very difficult. It's even hard for me. I mean, it's just tedious and it's just hard. I mean, I would have appreciated sitting there with Lakshmanju, when I was that age, living over there. But nowadays, it certainly is not written for the modern student because it's just too time consuming and it's just difficult, very difficult. So, but that is there. And so the scholars can refer to that. Lakshmanju was a living exponent of the oral tradition. He was the last one in Kashmir. So we do have a lot of his material, and it's just a question of, working through it. And it's a lifetime's worth of work. So there's a number of scholars that are working on it, and hopefully, we're going to get something reasonable in our lifetime. I hope. We'll see. But at least it's not lost. Much of the Kashmir Shaivite literature is lost. And so we're working with what we have. Yes, Michael.
I have I guess it's kind of a sociological question. And we're studying Kashmir Shaivism. If I went now, or was there a time in the past that if I had gone to Kashmir, would I have come across Shaivite temples or villages, or was it really not, I don't mean just like only, but it was a philosophical school, or was it really communities of Shaivites at some point, or it's still today?
That's a really, really good question, actually. Prior to the incursion of the Muslims into Kashmir, there was communities of Shaivites. In fact, that's the way it was studied and transmitted. And as an example of that, which I like to refer to, is Abhinavagupta's situation. It was his whole family, and people would come to their house and they would study with Abhinavagupta. 25, 30 people, not hundreds, because, a kilometer down the road, there was another, what we call Kula school in Shaivism, the Kula of another teacher that was transmitting, of course, not necessarily the stature of Abhinavagupta, but let's just say we were living in Abhinavagupta's time. Unless you had exposure to him, you would be going to the teacher that your parents went to, and to that lineage. Okay, so you wouldn't even know that Abhinavagupta was this, heralded, supreme siddha, unless you had been in his satsang. You wouldn't know it. You wouldn't know what was going on. And so, because it was ubiquitous, it was everywhere. Everybody was doing this, and then, so it was everywhere. To answer the question, yes, it was everywhere. It was every family was studying these scriptures, and was studying with a master, with a teacher, and there was an oral transmission. And then there was the Muslims came in, as you know, they came over, and they completely decimated almost all the temples in Kashmir. And there are still some left, but not anything like what it was. And they worked their way down into India, and they did the same thing all the way through. And of course, there was mixed influences. You see, if you go to India, you'll see the Muslim influence. You'll see the Hindu influence there, and they're living side by side now. But there was a lot of destruction. There was a lot of destruction because the Muslim forces were very violent, and the Hindus were very passive. So they were taken over and taken advantage of quite readily. And so that's what happened. So that now in Kashmir, it's primarily, and there's a transition going on actually right now. One of my guru brothers is up there in Kashmir, right there at Lakshmanju's ashram. But it's a conflict zone right now. Not as bad as Ukraine or anything like that, or Israel, but or Gaza, but it's a conflict zone, and there's a lot of sniping and different kinds of things going back and forth. So it's very difficult to travel there. But what's happening is that and not through proper, not with the proper intent, in my view, but the Hindu government under Modi is a big time Hindu. He's a yogi and all that. That's the good side. And the bad side is that, he doesn't see equally when it comes to Muslims and Hindus. So the Hindus get the high road and the Muslims get thrown under the bus. That's what's happening in India right now. And what they're trying to do is and my friend Brahmananda tells me that that's what's happening. They're trying to transplant the Indian acharyas back into Kashmir. They're trying to get the families to come back to Kashmir and repopulate. It's kind of like what the Israelis are doing over there in the, trying to, establish settlements up there. Well, they're doing the same thing in India, in Kashmir. So there is that movement afoot. Of course, as you know, I mean, looking at history, you all well aware of all that. It takes time. It takes time. It's not going to happen in our lifetime, but there is that movement afoot. And then there, of course, is the revival of the Kashmir Shaivite literature. That was the big thing. There was about 193 manuscripts that were discovered, and they were part of what's called, I have to go over to my shelf over there to make sure it's exact, the Kashmir series something, and they had 80 lots of all of these 190 something scriptures, and they distributed them. This was around the turn of the century. I'm talking about the 20th century. Around 1920, something like that. They distributed them around to all the universities around the world. So these original manuscripts were communicated in writing to all these universities. So they're stored there. And this is what the scholars, this was the kind of the starting point for much of the scholarly activity that's going on now. Unfortunately, there was a lot of errors in the transcriptions and all this, that, and the other thing. And so one of the things that Lakshmanju did, for example, is that he corrected many of the most important scriptures that Abhinavagupta, being again the leading exponent of Shaivite literature and philosophy, he corrected a lot of those early manuscripts, working with current day scholars. So Lakshmanju made a major contribution to the study of Kashmir Shaivism. And Jayadev Singh, whose translations that we do have, he studied very, very intensively. He was a scholar himself. I mean, a well-known scholar in India is called, the highest level is called an acharya. He was an acharya of his own right. He studied with two of the greatest acharyas of his time. One was Gopinath Kaviraj, which was a professor in Benares. Benares, or Varanasi, is like the center of Hindu education, higher education. Sanskrit is in Benares. That's one of the great cities of India, northern India, on the Ganges. Gopinath Kaviraj was a professor there at the Hindu University or something. I mean, he was extremely well known and had published a lot. And then Lakshmanju was the other. And Jayadev Singh studied with both of them. He would go and actually, I think it was the Pratyabhigna, for example, he went to Kashmir and would sit there like a humble student at the feet of Lakshmanju, and they went together. Lakshmanju, because he was such a prominent scholar, Lakshmanju spent an enormous amount of time with him, and they went word by word through the scriptures. And Jayadev Singh, excuse me, did a tremendous job in terms of translating that and interpreting exactly what he said. They took copious notes. Some of it was recorded by John Hughes, and that is available. I mean, they've got it all in their nonprofit organization over there in California. But they're continuing. They're dedicated. Their mission is to get all this material out. So it's not like they're holding it, some kind of thing like that. Not at all. They're really working hard. And John's old. He's older. He's in his 80s, I think. I've been wanting to try to bring him on a podcast. And that is one of the things I hope to be able to do in 2024, assuming he's still alive. But he's got a wealth of information. He studied with and spent time there in the ashram a number of years, him and his wife. And then I think they had 2 kids, and both of them were born there in India. But they live in Los Angeles now. So he had a recorder. How about that? And Lakshmanji was like, yeah, you get that recorded, get it recorded. And so Lakshmanji was totally on it. And Baba was too. I mean, I recorded much of Baba's early talks and stuff. I had reams and reams of it, and I lost it because it was on little cassettes, and they just rotted, in the humidity and all this stuff. I was traveling here, there, and everywhere, and it was one of the regrets of my life, honestly. But it is what it is. I still have some of the original transcripts, but those recordings, I lost most, if not all of them. So anyway, that's to make a long story short, but it wasn't very short. Make a short question long. Well, was that answering the question though, Michael? Yeah. That's it. That was a good question. That is a good question to understand sort of kind of where we are right now. But you can go, well, I wouldn't recommend any of you all going to Kashmir now, even though my friend is up there and does go up there. But, it's kind of like if you lived in Gaza, well, having rockets coming in every day, or in Israel, having rockets coming through every night would be just normal, but not exactly what any of us would probably really want to be subjecting ourselves to. This is kind of the way it is up in Kashmir. When you're there, he's been there for 4 or 5 years now, and he's an American, born in Pittsburgh, but he took sannyas not with me, but a few years later. We've been friends for all those years. But he's been living up there. And so it's kind of, he knows the chief of police and all that. And, you get used to it. You get used to it. And that's kind of the sad part. You get used to violence, and that's what we all have gotten used to. We get used to violence, and we lose our sensitivity, our supreme sensitivity to it. So back to the Yoga Sutras, because we're going to take a little break for meditation too, for sure. So the next word is important, which is a big word, is chitta. Chitta is a very important word, and Taimani does talk about it. But I think it's important to understand that there are multiple different aspects to chitta. Chitta is translated simply as the mind, as mind. But in yoga philosophy, there are 3 different aspects to that. And this is very important. And I want to make sure that you understand this key point. I don't have a graphic that I was planning on, but I ran out of time. I want to get you a graphic, and I'm going to get that to you. A graphic of the tattvas. You might think, well, what's that about? They didn't mention anything about tattvas. But the tattvas, understanding the tattvas is very, very important. In Kashmir Shaivism, there are 36 tattvas. In Sankhya and in yoga, only 25. So you understand why there's this further evolution. Hold on just a second. Let me just pull this over. See if I have it here somewhere. I think I do. So many things here. Okay. Well, I thought I was going to be able to just put my hand on it, but stacks are too high and I couldn't find it. But I will. I'm going to send you a graphic, which is a very, very nice depiction of the 36 tattvas, and we'll be able to understand kind of the difference between Kashmir Shaivism and yoga philosophy and Sankhya. This is an important aspect, especially in the context of the discussion about chitta. Chitta has three aspects. Mind has three aspects. The antakarna, manas, and buddhi. So in English, the intellect is the first evolute from the pinnacle, which is Purusha and Prakriti. In Sankhya and in yoga, it's Purusha and Prakriti. Prakriti is all phenomenal existence, starting with the mind. And its first evolute is the intellect, ahankara, the intellect. I think it's ahankara. Anyway, the intellect, stick with the English here. The intellect is the first, everything comes from intellect. And you'll see this graphically in this picture that I'm going to send you. And this is important to understand, because at the end of the day, the intellect is important. It's through the intellect that we discern the whole phenomenal world. The manas, which is also called mind. So there's chitta, which is translated as mind, and manas, which is one of the three aspects of mind, is also called mind in English. So we use the Sanskrit word manas. Chitta, in this translation, he uses chitta as mind, which includes the three aspects of the mind: the intellect, the ego, and manas, which is the mind. Also, that aspect of manas is what collects all the sensory input, but it doesn't have the capacity to discern. It just collects the information. And it's the buddhi, it's the intellect that discerns what is being collected. And then you act according to the intellect. And then the ego attributes, that's mine, that's yours. The ego makes it yours. Those are the three aspects of mind. Chitta. Chitta in this translation will always be referred to as mind. That's what Taimani is doing here. It always refers to it as mind. So it's a little different than in modern psychology. Mind is different. so this more granular breakout of mind is important. If you see it in the chart, you'll see that everything comes back to or begins with the intellect. That's the importance of intellect. So those that are concerned that you have to, we're going beyond the mind and all. I mean, I'm often, when I'm in a larger, more, not as schooled group, they get all concerned that we're leaving our rational mind behind. No, we're not. It's the last vestige of differentiation, and it's the last thing that we've got to allow to settle, give up, before we can enter into the infinite space of pure consciousness. So it's not something that it's something that you use throughout the whole process. It's what you use for discernment, and what we call, there's a big word in Vedanta particularly, but it's called viveka, which is discrimination. That's where you discriminate. You discriminate with the intellect. The intellect is the vehicle for discrimination. Discrimination is a very, very important aspect of sadhana. Discriminating, the ultimate discrimination, is the discrimination between the real and the unreal, the self and the non-self, so to speak. We know everything is the self. That's the conundrum there. But when you're discriminating, as in Vedanta or in the school of Sankhya, then there is subject-object. In Shaivism, in the more evolved philosophical tradition and the ultimate understanding, it's all just one. So viveka, the discrimination, doesn't play so heavily as it does in the more dualistic systems. Okay. So that's just a, I'm just glossing. That's a word that they use. I didn't mean to say that, but yes, I did. So I'm just glossing this sutra here, and then you can, as you continue to, dig into this and reflect on it, it will start to crystallize. As it will come in its own time. It will come in its own time. So then the next word is vritti. Vritti. Vritti is the modifications of the mind. Now, Taimani breaks in there and gets into getting real heady about it and starts talking about transformations and different kinds of things like that, which are referred to later on in the sutras. And that's why he mentions it now. But I prefer to just leave it as it is. Vrittis are very simple. They're modifications of the mind. Any kind of activity in the mind are vrittis. And when we get to the point later on in the sutras and we start talking about the granularity of those vrittis, we're going to be getting some of those just shortly here. We start talking about the kleshas, which is the next few sutras here coming up, like 10 through 11 or something like that. So at this point, I think it's good enough just to understand that vrittis are activity, any kind of activity in the mind. And that is what you want to be still. You want them to be completely quiescent in every way. So how does that, again, it's not a wrestling the mind into that. The vrittis are nothing but the expression of samskaras. The samskaras that you are living through are vrittis. That's what we call them. We call them vrittis. So the goal is to purify the system, your body, mind complex, body, mind, spirit, to purify that of the samskaric impressions. That's what sadhana is really all about, because you're not going to be able to get into the stabilized state of quiescence and peace unless you burn or somehow release those samskaras or those impressions. They're stored in the subtle body. Technically, they say in the sushumna, which is the central channel, but they can be burned in a number of different ways. Burn means, when we talk about samskaras, we talk about seeds. They're seeds, they're impressions, but they talk about them as seeds. So you burn the seeds and then there's nothing left. You can burn those seeds, or you can completely obliterate a samskara through knowledge, through wisdom, or you can do that by releasing them, letting them go. In other words, breaking the attachment to them. And as I mentioned earlier, through japa and meditation, you purify them. Through all of those means, we work with them. And that's what we're doing here. We're doing the knowledge piece now with this study of the scripture. As we continue to evolve through our awareness of the scripture and understand it more deeply, the knowledge will burn those samskaras. Through your practice of meditation and japa, you will purify the vehicle such that those samskaras will just dissolve back into the consciousness from which they arose. So we're approaching it from all different angles is the point. Chanting, for example, one of the things we do in the ashram, this is something that burns samskaras. But it purifies both the internal environment and the external environment. That's why it's so readily used in our tradition. So let's keep it simple for right now, without getting into all the, pedantic analysis that Taimani has ventured into here. I just want to keep it simple. The vrittis are any kind of activity in the mind. And then as we move through the sutras, we'll get into the granularity of that, and we'll break it into, finer and finer awareness and understanding. I mean, at one point in this, I guess I have to speak to that. Taimani says, and he's talking about chitta vrittis, he says, this is not a vibration. Where he's coming from is not where we're coming from, certainly not where I'm coming from. It is, in fact, a vibration, because everything is vibration. But he's referring to the occult vibrational prevalence of that particular period. He's coming from the theosophical point of view, and they were the founder of theosophy was heavily involved in the occult, which is mystical phenomena, but they called it occult in those periods. And so they didn't want to be kind of tagged that way. And so he's trying to differentiate the Yoga Sutras, which is pure yoga philosophy, from occult. So it's a contextual period analysis there. And so I want to be clear that if you've read his commentary here, he says the first thing to note is that chitta vritti is not a vibration. Well, I want to be real clear. It is a vibration. It is, because everything is a vibration. There's nothing but vibration. And because they don't have the wider and more complete understanding of consciousness and awareness, then they're differentiating that in the subject-object relationship. And he says the second point to note is that this connection of chitta vritti is not a mental image, though it may be, he says. And then he says the fivefold classification of chitta vritti is definitely in I think it's 1 point, what does he say, 1.5? Yeah, 1.5 definitely shows this. Well, no, that's not right. That's not where we are. So I want to blow past that, and you can pick it up later if you have any issues with it. We can talk about it. But in our system, in the actual practice, which we're seeking to receive clarity and guidance from the Yoga Sutras, that is not a concept that we are buying into. We're way past that. There is nothing but consciousness, period. There's no question about that. Modern physics, quantum physics, and everything that we know lines up perfectly to say that everything is consciousness. And so that's a place that we're coming from, and that's indelible. It can't be changed. In other words, that's eternal truth, capital T. And the last word in this sutra is nirodha. And that's a word that we we will unpack in great detail. And I think there's a reference there to the discussion in 3.9. Let's see, I think I have that marked out here, 3.9. And 3.9 is he encourages us to look at 3.9, and I think that is good. Let's see if I can have that right there here. I wanted to make sure we were, I think I put it here in Tiny's book. Yeah, 3.9. 3.9 is that's worthy of contemplation. Again, don't get too bogged down in it, because his commentary is pretty extensive, but you can read over it. And he says there very clearly, pretty much down the way in the commentary, the conclusion. It is this condition of nirodha is not a state of ordinary mental vacuum, but a state of samadhi in which the yogi is in complete control of the mind. Actually, it's more subtle than that, and he will modify that to some degree as we unpack this. What is actually happening, it's not a controlling of the mind. You control the mind up to that point, and that's why in that particular, the 3.9 in chapter 3, there is an emphasis on controlling the mind, because the whole of chapter 3 is a discussion about samyama, and samyama is a controlling aspect that precedes the state of samadhi. So you do control the mind up to the point of samadhi, which is the final state, is called kaivalya in yoga. In that state, there's no controlling anymore. All the controlling is gone. All the activity of the intellect is finished. You've done the work. Now you're just resting in a state of pure awareness. That's it. There's no control. Control, it seems to connote effort, but there's no effort. The efforting is finished in the final state of kaivalya. It's just an opening out and expansion of awareness, which in this system is the final state. But in Shaivism, what that opening out continues, it continues beyond that. And there is a further state of samadhi. which is that opening out continues to expand till the point when you are embracing everything in the universe as your very own self or as that consciousness and pure awareness. This is not an efforting. This is just a continued expansion of your awareness. The efforting piece is finished. Now you're just surrendering into expansion. It's expansion of awareness. I'm going to use that as our segue into our meditation period, because that's an important point. So while the Yoga Sutras is this whole process of getting to Kaivalya through efforting, what we have already studied through the Pratyabhijna is the fact that we can right now, right this very moment, experience that state of pure awareness. It is available to us right now, albeit it will be momentarily because of the samskaric impressions. They won't allow the stabilization, normally speaking. But here again, if your fixation and your intention is intense enough, you can maintain the awareness, pure awareness. That is the essence of the school of recognition, which is Pratyabhijna, which we studied in the last scripture. Let's do it. If there's any questions, let me know. If not, we're going to do it right now because we can. And that's the point. That's the point that I want everybody to fully embrace. And at this point, maybe it's just believe in. But right now, you can enter into the state of pure awareness. Of course, as I said, it will not be stabilized because we have to still work through the samskaric impressions. But the more we visit that, and Chamaraja said that in our last scripture that we studied, the more we visit that state of pure awareness, the more it kind of maintains, the more easy it is to enter into it and to stabilize it. If we think that it's never going to happen, or it's, it's not within our grasp and all that negative doubt and all that stuff that just eats your soul, then that's what it is. You're going to be that way. But if you change your orientation, you change the direction in which you're looking, and you acknowledge with full intention that I can and I will and I am experiencing the state of pure awareness. That's what we're going to meditate on right now. Find yourself that nice, comfortable position. I'll dial up a 15-minute meditation. That's all we've got. So remember, the relaxation piece is the important piece. You must be able to relax. Relaxation is how you release those samskaric impressions. You open the channel for the Shakti to flow. Relaxation is a very, very, very important aspect of the meditation. If you open up, and relax. Ask the question, ask the supreme intelligence to show you what you need right now and to experience that directly. And then relax into the answer. You will receive it. Use the mantra in everything possible to invoke that state of open receptance and pure awareness.
I know we've run out of time here, but if there are any questions, I'm perfectly happy to take any questions. And if not, I just want to say in closing that remember to keep it simple. Don't get bogged down with any of this heady discussion, meaning not discussion from me, but from the commentators. Keep it simple. And remember, there's only consciousness, pure consciousness. And you have the infinite capacity to access that consciousness. The infinite intelligence, omnipotence, and ever presence of that consciousness is always available to you because that's who and what you are. It's simple. Remember, it's simple. So whenever you start getting knotted up in thought and you think it's complex, immediately catch yourself. You are not the content of the mind, the experiences. You are the mind, but you are the consciousness of the mind. That's where you want to maintain your focus. That's it. Thank you all very much. It's a divine pleasure. Absolutely. Hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend, and then we'll get this this recording up, and even the last one, we'll get that repaired so that you can dial it right into that and find whatever you need. Love you guys tremendously. Thank you. I appreciate you in every way.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Nicholas.